Now, Liz Wheeler was invited to the White House. I told you a little bit of the story, but I'm going to give her the floor because I want Liz. You have the time that you need to tell this story, and I'm not going to interrupt you. But tell us exactly what happened because you were there in the Oval Office yesterday.
I was, and thank you for having me this morning, Glenn. People are very mad about what happened yesterday, and honestly, I don't blame them for being mad.
Right.
I am also very mad about what happened yesterday,
right?
Because we all expected to get the dirtiest dirt that we have ever gotten, the corruption of the government, the Epstein Files. We were promised this, we expected this, and we didn't get it.
Hang on just
and
a
when
second.
We didn't get it.
Hang on just a sec before. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. But you have another reason. Because you were at the White House, but you didn't know that's what you were asked to be there for. So you looks like you're carrying water for the White House when you were just there and they call you in and say, oh, here's the deal. Correct? I feel like if it's
Somewhat,
nefarious,
yeah.
You've kind of been used.
Well, let me get to that because
okay,
I think
right.
when I tell the narrative story, it will make clear we weren't actually at the White House for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The Epstein Files is not why we were called in. We were called in to be given access to the most powerful people running our country. We met with almost every cabinet secretary, with the vice president, with the president himself, with all of the staff. We were given access as new media figures to replace the legacy media who has lied to us and demeaned us for all of these years. They are no longer going to be rewarded for doing that. So we were given the access to these people. But again, let me tell the narrative because I want to make sure that everyone knows what happened because people are angry, and rightfully so, because they felt like they were subject to a bait and switch, which was not the intention, I think, on anyone's part, certainly not on my part. So we were invited to the White House, and we were in meetings with all of these different cabinet officials. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, comes into the room with Kash Patel, the FBI director, and they talk to us about what they've been doing. They give us some glimpses of what's happening behind the scenes. And Pam Bondi then brings a stack of these white binders, these infamous white binders that say Epstein Files Phase 1 on them. And when we saw these binders, of course, all of our jaws dropped, and we had the same assumption that this was going to be the juicy stuff. This was what we've been waiting for. And almost immediately, Pam Bondi says, wait a second, this is not juicy. You're not going to find in these binders what you think you're going to find in these binders. Let me explain. And immediately, she holds up that letter. I posted that letter on my X account. It was widely reported yesterday, and says, this binder is filled with 200 pages of Epstein files that was given to me by the FBI when I made the request, upon the request of the president, because he was fulfilling his promise, to declassify and release the Epstein files. I asked the FBI, give me the files. They brought me these 200 pages, put them on the desk, and assured me that this was all the files that they had. And Pam Bondi relates to us. She's like, it seemed weird. I smelled a rat because this is all the files. This is all we have. And she's like, and I repeatedly made requests to verify, are you sure this is all the files? And I was assured that this was all the files. And she's like, you will find in this binder that it's a nothing burger, that we have most of this information already declassified and redacted. I do believe there's a few things in there that hadn't, but it's nothing salacious. It's just a contact list of phone numbers. It's nothing. And flight logs. It's stuff we already have. And she said, the scandal is that last night, after it was clear that I was going to release these documents, I got contacted by a whistleblower from within the SDNY, which of course is part of the Department of Justice, part of the FBI. And this whistleblower told me that the SDNY was hiding potentially thousands of more documents about Epstein because they did not want her to release it.
Okay.
Now, this, of course, if true, is the scandal of the century.
Yes.
That there are deep state agents, swamp creatures in the swamp, in the FBI, in the SDNY, that are defying the President of the United States, defying the Attorney General, defying the Director of the FBI. That is breathtaking. I'm at a loss for words in how breathtaking this is to see the swamp. Now, you and I know, Glenn, everyone with us today knows that just because you cut off the head of the snake, just because you replace the top political appointees at an agency, it doesn't remove immediately all of those who would wish to subvert the will of the president. That takes time.
Yep.
And so the fact that we have concrete evidence in the form of this tangible binder that they gave this to Pam Bondi and told her, this is it, this is the smoking gun, when it is a nothing burger, that is a huge story. The entire SDNY should be fired. This place should be absolutely razed.
I agree.
So put a pin in that for a second. That's what happened in the secure briefing room at the White House. We met with we went into the Oval Office. We talked to President Trump. We talked to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. We talked to HHS Secretary RFK Jr. And then, of course, we weren't allowed to have our phones on us during this time in the West Wing. They were in a secure box downstairs. We were told that, we needed to leave this secure briefing room because the UK Prime Minister was coming and they were going to take us out the back of the White House and downstairs to get our phones. We were, of course, really excited because we had just gotten a coin from the president personally, and he was showing us the portraits in the Oval Office. I mean, it's a surreal experience to visit this central place of power, and we were really honored to have been there, as I think anyone would be. So we go out back, excited to get our phones, because as soon as we get these phones, we're going to dive into these binders. We know that there's nothing really in them, but we have this letter, this huge story to break that previously would have been given to the legacy media, but it was given to us about the SDNY. But as we're going out the back door, we're rushed a little bit by White House staff. And I personally found this funny because I'm a history nerd. We're told, hurry, the British are coming. The British are coming. Right. Because we needed to be out of the way of the hallway for the UK Prime Minister. Now, being the political nerds that we are, we all thought that was really funny. When's the last time someone shouted the British are coming in the White House? But once we get outside, we see that there's a gaggle of press, essentially in the bushes to the side of the White House. And the looks on their faces, so sour, so dour, so astonished to see us, because it wasn't a publicly announced meeting per se. And they were kind of like, what the heck are you guys doing here? And so we were, again, giddy from having been in the Oval Office, having just come out of a meeting with RFK where he was telling us some remarkable things he's working on. And they were curious about what we were holding. Now, this is a very important part of the story. We had not been told up to that point that there was any sort of embargo on this information. It was our impression at that moment that within about 2 minutes, we would be able to break the story of the SDNY stonewalling Pam Bondi. And so when the media was so sour and bitter that we had gotten this binder, yes, we were kind of laughing at them. We were holding up the binders in defiance, saying, you know what? You've been relegated to the bushes because you lie and you smear and you gaslight the American people, and we are the media now. And that was the background of that picture. Now, within about 2 minutes of that picture being taken, we were told, please don't report on the binder itself or the story about the SDNY until 3:30 in the afternoon, because they didn't want the press conference between Donald Trump and the UK Prime Minister to be solely focused on the SDNY Epstein Files story. So all of a sudden, we are in this situation where the press has gotten photos of us with these binders that appear to be real Epstein Files, and yet we knew that they were not. And we begged for the embargo to be lifted. The process of that embargo being lifted was frankly botched up. That should have been, it was an error on the part of the White House not to allow us to go ahead and do that. We, of course, were being respectful of that embargo because we were just given an exclusive story. But what happened then is pictures of us holding the binders were the only things that we were allowed to post at that moment. But we thought we'd be able, within about 5 minutes of those posts, just getting people's attention, to tell what the real story is.
Right.
And yet the embargo wasn't lifted. And so it created this situation. And I cannot even tell you how frantic I felt in this situation, Glenn, because it appears to be a bait and switch. And my goodness, that's the last thing that was ever intended. I was frantic behind the scenes telling the White House, you have to let me tell this story. You have to let me release this. Do you know what this looks like publicly? But unfortunately, it was at least over an hour before we were able to do that. And so in the interim, everyone in the country, understandably so, assumed that those binders were full of Epstein files, and they felt like we were withholding information from them. They felt like we were engaging in clickbait. They felt devastated and used when they found out there was nothing in it. And again, honestly, I'll be blunt. I totally understand why people are pissed off because I am too about that.
I am too. I'm pissed off for you and also as a citizen of America.